David Richman. Really enjoyed talking to David. He wrote an inspirational book, but it's much more than that. He interviewed many people. He had tragedy in his life where his sister passed away with cancer, and he was in a very bad place. And he turned to athleticism, and he turned things around. He ends up interviewing many people, talking about their cancer. So he decided to take a bicycle run from Los Angeles to Florida to New York, 5,000 miles. And in the book, Cycle of Life, he uh, talks about the travel with the bike. Next chapter is another person. And we talk about these wonderfully inspiring people like Terry and Patricia and Bobby and Marlene and Jen. And it's a wonderful, inspirational discussion. You're going to really enjoy it. I mean, the time just flew by. Some of the teasers, ice cream cone jacket. What's that about? You know, gained lots of observation, but no conclusion. There's something that happens at the end of this discussion that's never happened to me before in my life. Something that's incredible. You're simply not going to believe it. And I'll just tease you with this. The number one shows up in David's life. He believes from his father, then after his sister passes, in remarkable ways, keeps on appearing. Children's room numbers at their school. He runs, and then he finds out he ran, a mile, 0.11. And something happens at the end of this episode that is absolutely remarkable. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business that lasted over 25 years? Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. Very excited. David Richman.
Man, you have some bigwigs on your show, man. A lot of crazy people that have done a lot of crazy stuff. I don't know if I can keep my end of the bargain up, but I'll
David,
try.
you are endlessly fascinating. What should friends do when their friends have cancer?
What should they
Yeah.
do? Don't disappear. There's not a lot of similarities between people's experience with cancer. And I mean, whether they're a doctor, a patient, a loved one, a friend, you're going through it, you're watching somebody go through it. Everybody's experienced, I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of people about this. Everybody's experience is unique, but one thing that is very prevalent is the sense of abandonment, isolation. There's some other things. The more the don'ts are what come to mind than what to do. Like don't abandon. Don't be afraid to ask the bad, tough questions. Don't say you're sorry because you're not responsible for it. Don't give me sympathy. I don't want sympathy. I love for you to be sympathetic. I love for you to care about me and show compassion, but don't look at me with puppy dog eyes and give me
Mm,
sympathy. That doesn't make it
mm.
better. I noticed a big thing is when I talk to people is they don't like to have their experience um, used as a comparison to somebody else's.
Ah,
So, when you're dealing with the fact that you're seeing your grandmother, say, die of cancer, don't then go tell me how your dog has cancer as well.
mm.
Like I like it. It's does that make sense?
It's a unique experience.
Hmm. Yeah, everybody's experience is unique, and everybody's dealing with very different traumas that affect their experience. If you always felt lonely in the world, um, then that would give you a hard time during cancer because you feel even more lonely. What if you were the person who was the always upbeat leader of your pack, and now you're going through this thing, and you're like, oh, I can't be upbeat leader of the pack, but I can't let everybody else know that. So, that could be a lonely. I mean, there's just everybody's experience is different.
Wow. It's amazing to me how you got where you are, and you grew up, you had a very young mother, an older father, and you weren't in a household that particularly appreciated you. You ended up, going to Las Vegas. You were living in your car. You were in a very troubled relationship, dysfunctional. Then your sister gets diagnosed with cancer. Your friend kind of has a kind of come to Jesus, check yourself before you wreck yourself kind of thing. And it just turned you completely around.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, listen, everybody has a unique experience, but when you try to overcome something, or when something happens to you that changes the course of
Mm,
your life, that by your choice, right? Um, yeah, sometimes you just don't hear what you hear until you hear it. You don't know what you know until you
mm,
know it. And for me, that uh, kind of awareness of myself and where I was at in life and how I had interacted with the world and the positives and negatives of my experience, they were brought. I heard it. They came crashing down to me when I had that conversation with my friend because, um, look, everybody has their problems, but my biggest problem was that I kind of went through life with my head down, plowing through problems, some of those that I created myself, and trying to come up with fixes. And just like, I can only tell you this, like I was really good at plowing through things, but I never picked my
hmm.
head up, and I didn't know how to interact with the world. And when my friend said to me, dude, everything that comes into your life is like a wild dog, and you give it a home, and you feed it, and you groom it, and then you go to pet it, and it bites you, and you wonder, like, why did it bite you? It's a wild dog. It doesn't know any better. And so why are you complaining about the results of all your problems? Why don't you look in the mirror and see, why do you keep attacking these problems? Why do you keep inviting these problems into your life? And I went, oh shoot, you know what? That makes a lot of
Wow.
sense.
Wow. But without that, David, you wouldn't be where you are now. You wouldn't have wrote this great book. You wouldn't have, you know, wrote a 15, 5,000 miles and interview with these people and do all your triathlons. I mean, that you needed that to turn it around.
I did. It was a number of things that happened all in the same period of time, Joey. Um, so, um, I was in a abusive relationship. I was married to an abusive alcoholic. Uh, And as a guy, especially a guy that's used to solving problems, I mean, like I couldn't solve that
Mm,
problem. I certainly couldn't fight back. I didn't know how to deal with it. I just kept trying to make it better and hope it would go away. And it just kept getting worse. So that thing was coming to a head. Um, and I was completely stressed out about that and some other things in my life. And then I get the call from my sister saying I got terminal brain cancer. Excuse me. And then my friend has this talk with me that says, like, why don't you look in the mirror? And so I did. I literally stopped and I looked in the mirror. And the first thing you have to do when you look in the mirror is pick
hmm.
your head up. You can't be looking, you know, head in the sand, just plowing through life. You got to stop and take a deep breath. And I had never done that. I had never, ever
Hmm.
done that. I never made an
Hmm.
assessment. Like, is this where I want to be? Is this, am I the best person I could be? Am I living a fulfilled life? You know, am I making good decisions? A lot of people are well equipped to do that along their life, and they make little micro adjustments, and they, you know, they get out of bad relationships. They get, you know, they lean into good relationships or bad experiences and lean into good experiences. And I was just lost. I didn't have any sense of awareness. I love to tell people, like, I learned a ton of lessons, and some of them very hard lessons. I just never knew how to apply them to
Hmm.
myself, you know? And then when I looked in the mirror and I said, Joey, like, what are you? I said, you know, you're very overweight. You're a smoker. You're not athletic. You're a guy who goes searching for problems or being a magnet
Hmm.
for them. Um, you know, you don't know who you are. You don't interact with the world in a authentic, you know, kind of like on purpose way. And you know, yeah, I had some great qualities, but you know, I wasn't aware of them. I just wasn't living this kind of grounded, who am I and how am I interacting with the world kind of life. And I wasn't happy. I mean, when I took the look at myself, I was not happy. I was not in a good place. And I'm like, how did you
Hmm.
get here? Like who are you even? And I didn't have the answer. So yeah, because I was given the right words at the right time, that made me take this self-assessment of myself, and I did it in a very honest way. A lot of times when you're coming out of trauma, for me, coming out of trauma was escaping with my 4-year-old twins from a violent alcoholic. That gives you a moment to take a deep breath and say, okay, whew, you know, look around and go, okay, well, when you come out of trauma, sometimes you have that assessment. And so I just had the self-assessment at the right time where I could be honest with myself and say, okay, dude, like here's what you need to fix or learn or get rid of. And so that was definitely, I know it's a long rambling
Not at
answer a
all.
little bit, Joey, but that was the that was the time when I could, for the first time in my life, go, okay, you got to live on
Hmm.
purpose. Like you got to try to live on purpose.
And when that switch happened, David, did it happen over a series of months, years? I mean, did you tell people about it? Did you start journaling about it? I mean, what changed in your life when that, 180 happened?
Um, well, there were two things. I'm really good at processing stuff inside.
Mhm.
Uh, um, so I could let things marinate, but I was really observant. I always, ever since I was a little kid, I was very observant, and I could let things marinate. But I never was observant about that aspect. Like, how am I interacting with the
Hmm.
world? Like, who am I and how am I interacting with the world? I was a like like I don't know how to say it, but I was like in the audience watching the
Hmm.
play. I wasn't part of the play. And when I started to become part of the play, I'm like, all right, where can we go with this thing? And so for me, that was starting to become athletic, and that's where I said, okay, well, if I could start running, that'll make me not smoke. Okay, and if I start to think that I'm important and I care about myself enough to make a couple of good decisions, then I'll make more decisions because they'll be good for me, and I can maybe build on that. So that's what I thought. Like, okay, if you well, think about people that are harmful to themselves, right? That becomes a safe place for them to go, and then they self harm deeper and harder, and that becomes their pattern. So on the other side, I was thinking, well, if I start to make good decisions and purposeful decisions and authentic, meaningful, interacting with the world in the way that I'm in the play kind of
Hmm.
decisions, boy, I want to make more and more and more of those. So it became a
Hmm.
draw. And athletics, for me became from a 2-minute run. So I would stop smoking to now saying that maybe I can run a 5K. And maybe if I run a 5K, I could run a 10K. And if I can run a 10K, then I can start to eat better. I'm going to stay not smoking cigarettes. And geez, I ran the 10K. Maybe I can do a
Hmm.
triathlon. Maybe I can do a half Ironman. Oh, maybe I can do an Ironman. Maybe I can do 3 Ironmans in a year, run 50 miles, run 100 miles. Why can't I do all of these things? And I started leaning into all this and saying, wow, man, like you can kind of accomplish whatever you want. And it's really started to spill into every area of my life. And so I don't know that it happened in weeks or months or years, but what happened was a a deeper, wider experience of being in the play rather than being an observer of the play, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what a great lesson to be learned there. And you describe at one point about these big parties that go on at your house, and you didn't know who these people were, and you'd be in your room and you'd be looking at them. And when you described looking at the play, that's what I envisioned this child looking out and looking at all these people just kind of, you know partying and being separate from you. And what it you also described when you first ran, how you were surprised you went 2 minutes, and how so that's very inspiring, because people, anybody listening, should really understand that it doesn't take much to start. And all of a sudden you ran for a couple of minutes, and you stopped smoking, and then you ran a little bit more, and you started eating better, and you just noticed that you could
Yeah.
perform better. I mean, it's such a great lesson, and it's inspiring, and more, I would hope that more people can learn that way.
And what we tend to do is we tend to see our, like, okay, I have some awareness of who I am right now, whether it's overweight, not athletic, unhappy at work, in a bad relationship, wherever. And then we tend to see this goal that is just like not
Mm,
achievable. Like, oh, I run 50 miles. Are you kidding me? Look at who I am. Be happy at work. I mean, it's just not possible, right? And so we see this goal; it's too far away, so we don't reach for it. And you're right. All you got to do is start taking one step, and one tiny little change now becomes
yeah.
easy. And then you can add another tiny change and another tiny change and another tiny change, and all of a sudden, it's like this theory, Joey, that like we look at people. Let's say we look at a corporation, and we see that they are a bad actor, and you go like, how in the world could a company become that
Mm,
bad? And we know, I'm not going to name any
sure.
companies, but we know companies that are in the news where you go like how are they have a
Mm,
culture that's that bad? Well, you got to remember, they had a culture that was really great at one point, and they took one tiny, tiny little step
mm,
towards the bad, and then a tiny, and then another, and then another, and then another. And what became like not good behavior slowly became bad behavior. And what became bad behavior became unethical
mm.
behavior. And the leap from unethical to illegal was one
Right.
tiny little step. It wasn't some all of a sudden you're going to
Right.
be, in my case, 38 years old and 50 pounds overweight and a smoker and unathletic to go running 100
Mm,
miles. It doesn't work that way. You got to take one tiny little step so that the next step becomes so much easier. When I finished the Ironman, to think that I could run 50 miles was like, yeah, I could go run 50 miles. That's no big deal. And when I ran 50 miles, I said, shoot, man, wouldn't it be kind of cool to run
hmm,
100 miles? And I did. But I couldn't have in the first day have even come close to imagining what it would be like to be a guy that could run 100 miles straight. It's that way with starting a business, writing a book, learning how to play a musical instrument, rewiring who you are and what kind of person you are, and leaning into good friends, getting rid of bad friends. These things they don't happen with a snap of
right.
a finger, right? We got to rewire it. And I think sorry to ramble
Not
a
at
little bit.
all.
But I think what the answer for me was, relative to how quickly it happened that you asked me, is once you take that honest assessment, then you could just say, okay, forgive yourself and just let it go. Just
Mm,
forgive yourself. Just
mm,
let it go. Like okay, so you're overweight. So you haven't taken the best decisions on who your friends are. So you haven't yet sat down to pursue your art hobby. Just
mm,
let it go and just start. Just begin. But a lot of times we're our biggest critics, and our biggest
Right.
roadblocks are just like, nah, it's too late for me, or it's a stupid idea, or I wasted so much time. I say that's wrong. You could start anytime,
Yeah.
and just take one little step towards whatever goal you want, and it'll lead to another and another and another, and pretty soon the goal is only a step
That's
away.
right.
It's not a million steps away.
Yeah, well said, David. I talk often about, obesity and overweight, this serious epidemic in our country. It's up to close to 75%. Just small changes. Park far away from the store. So you have to walk with it.
Yeah.
Don't take any more elevators or escalators, use the stairs. Just two simple things will get you a little bit more active. And like you say, before you know it, it'll help. It'll help. And it's amazing. You know, cut the sugary drinks in half, just in half. There's just subtle things you could do. It's fascinating. Once you got the news from your sister, and you were really close to her because of you weren't in the best household with your parents. You were going to do an event, but unfortunately, she passed before it, and that was another
Mm.
kind of catalyst for you to
Mhm.
talk to more people. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So when I'm looking in the mirror and I go, okay, this is who you are, and these are the good things about you, and these are the bad things, and you got to start to work on being the best you. It was really liberating for me. It was very freeing. It was a very optimistic place for me because I could see. I didn't know where the end of the road would
Mm,
lead me, but I could see this long road of development and learning and transformation and feeling good about myself. And I could just see that ahead of me. Like, wow, like this could be really addictive, like becoming the best me and being at peace with me, and really starting to understand how I can be in the play rather than watching it. And I saw this big long road ahead of me. And at that same time, like we talked about, my sister was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer, and here she is, where her journey, her future, is going to be very short. And that was a big, uh, you know, gave a lot of perspective to what I was going through. Really made me pay attention to what was going on with her. And when I was paying attention to her and her husband and her kids and her caregivers and other people I saw at events that I would go to, is I came up with a common theme that I just kept seeing over and over, Joey, and that was that people were really good about dealing with the tasks of their cancer.
hmm,
How do I get a better doctor? How do I find out more information? How do I eat better? What can I do to sleep better? How can I navigate health insurance? How can I get my kids watched while I go to the chemo chair? Like these kind of things they were really good about. But when it came to the emotional side, how do you feel about it? Can you talk about the hard feelings behind it? Have you talked to your parents, your kids about the fact that you're going through something really difficult and how lonely? I mean, when it came to the emotional side, people were really unable to have these hard conversations. They didn't know what to say. They didn't know,
wow.
or they didn't want to say the wrong thing. They were embarrassed. They were ashamed. They whatever. And people either isolated or they were abandoned or a combination of both. And I said, man, why is that?
Hmm,
So it really hit me when the time that you just talked about. My sister was kind of near the end, and she said to me a few months before she passed, she goes, "Look, I want to be at this 24-hour race that's being done in my in my honor, and I want to root everybody on as they're around, putting teams together and walking around the track for 24 hours. It's a relay for life. A lot of people do them." And I went, "Wow, man, you're pretty sick. If you're going to be out there for the whole 24 hours, I'll run for the whole 24 hours." And we made this agreement that we would do that for each other. And she passed away a couple of days before the event, so she didn't get to see all these people, doing the event for her. But I said I'm going to still do it, and I walked, ran around the track for 24 hours, and I was really observant. I was watching how do people interact with each other, how do they deal with things, and man, when it came to the emotional side, it was silence.
really.
Very lively when it came to education, when it came to
Hmm.
bonding and all that. But boy, when you talk about the emotional side of it, very, very quiet, self contained, very reserved space. And I said, I got to try to figure out why. Why is that? Why is it that we're so ill equipped to have hard conversations around what's going on with people during times of trauma? Why is it that we're so, like, I don't know about you, but if before all this, if I walk by somebody at work and one of my employees and they were like, yeah, sorry, I'm late. I'm just a little distracted. My brother's kid had a really bad accident. They're in the hospital. I don't know if they're going to make it. It's just really a hard time. I'd be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And then I'd exit. Like, I don't want to,
Mm,
what do you say about something? I don't want any part of that. Right. You just want to exit as quickly as you can. Cause what the hell are you going to
right.
say? So who doesn't know that? Who doesn't have somebody in their life right now that's going through something difficult, maybe perhaps, life threatening even. Um, and they're afraid to call them because they don't know what to say. And that's a common theme, even when it's not something totally serious. But let's just say somebody's going through a breakup or a career change or they got laid off or whatever. Like, oh, we just kind of want to avoid them because we don't want to deal with the emotions of trauma. And that was the catalyst for the Cycle of Lives project.
Right. My sister passed away about 15 years ago, and people have the best intentions, just like you said, David, but they end up saying, the worst things. But it's so hard, and you're not, you don't want to, correct them. It's very tough. It's very, very tough. So you decide to write. Well, first of all, you decide to cycle from LA to Florida to New York. And then you also start interviewing all of these people with cancer. And your book, wonderfully, Cycle of Lives, has a chapter on where you are in the race. And then you interviewed many people, but you decide on 15, as I understand.
Yep.
And then you talk and you open up the chapter with the person's name and quick facts, what the relationship with cancer is, if they're a doctor, victim, etc., what strongest emotion. I mean, it's wonderfully laid out. It's wonderfully laid out, and it
Mm.
prepares the listener, for some that are very gut wrenching, some that are very, optimistic, then you kind of give a conclusion, you go on to the next one. And
Mm-hmm.
we just need to hear about, I mean, they're all excellent. They're all excellent. And, Terry, right? Uh,
Oh,
Parents kicked her out when she was
Terry.
18, and bone marrow transplant. The husband is, or the boyfriend's unfaithful, tells her on the way to the hospital. Everybody in her group dies. I mean, just inspiring. Do it for Terry. Please talk to us about Terry.
Oh man, well thanks. That was actually one of the hardest
Yeah.
stories to write because what I wanted to do, if we can understand this, like not just because we both lost a sister, but I can kind of wrap my brain around what it's like to lose somebody you
Right.
love. Just generically, lose somebody you love. I can kind of wrap my brain around what it's like to be abused as a kid. I can kind of wrap my brain around like substance
Mm.
abuse or making a bad decision and derailing your life for a time. I can identify with those things. I really can. uh but I really can't identify with what's going on with you during the extreme amount of trauma you might be in as you deal with
Mm.
cancer, as you lose a kid or you lose a spouse or something. I can't understand it. So what I wanted to try to do when I wrote these stories, and I interviewed everybody for like a year or 2 years sometimes before I really got to the heart of their stories. I wanted to say if point A was when you encountered cancer, that you could have been a 6 year old watching your dad die of
Mm.
cancer. You could have been an eighth grader going to a field trip at the hospital saying, I'm going to become a doctor. But whenever that is, that point where you encounter cancer is point A. Okay. Today is point B. How are you able to navigate A to B in relation to the other traumas you had experienced in your life? Because I might understand the other traumas and be able to understand who you are. And if I did, I would understand a little bit more about the human experience, who Joey is, how, like kind of what happened to him in his life that I could identify with it. So now when I understand the trauma he's going through, I might be able to relate a little bit more to him. If he's asking for help, it gives me a framework. If he is avoiding getting help, that's a framework. If he's open to talk, if he's not open to talking, all these different things, I can go, okay, I'm a little bit more well equipped. With Terry, I mean, could you imagine, right? She finds out she's a nurse and she's feeling bad. She finally says, I'm a nurse. I should know better. I got to go to the doctor. And the doctor says, yeah, you got a cancer and you got pretty bad cancer. And we're going to have to take some pretty severe measures to save your life. And she's in a relationship with someone. And as she's taking a taxi to go get checked in for a bone marrow transplant, right? The first the pre-check of getting what would be the one of the most brutal medical procedures you could ever have. She gets a phone call from her boyfriend saying, "Yeah, so I got somebody else pregnant and I'm going to stay here with them. You're on your own." I mean, you can't even
Yeah.
imagine that. Okay. Um but as you say, she survives. She gets into a support group. She's the only one that survives in that support group. And you go, "What the heck?" And then the cancer
Right.
comes back. And they tell her this time it's way worse. Okay? She's going to have another bone marrow transplant. Very unusual to have
Right.
two. Maybe, the donor that she finds might work, might not work, but she's going to do it anyway. And she gets ready to be cared for from out of this bone marrow transplant. And the boyfriend at the time, 10 years later, calls her up and says, I know I'm supposed to come take care of you, but I'm not strong enough. You're on your own. So again, she gets abandoned and abandoned and abandoned and abandoned. And what was so hard to write this story was that I thought to myself, is it's kind of pathetic. Like, I don't want to know about somebody that has that rough of a life. I don't want to know what the heck is going through their brain because it's just going to bring me down, man. It's like, the nonsense that people have to deal with. And I just don't want to be brought down. And then I'm having a conversation with her one day. And I go like how, we talk about fuzzy math. Her and I talked about fuzzy math because she goes like, everybody tells me you got a 2% chance to live. You got a 98% chance that this bad thing's going to happen. You got a 75% chance of the, and she goes, you know what? I just decided that everything's
Hmm.
50-50. Screw it. I'm either going to live or
Coin
I'm not.
toss.
I'm either going to find love
Hmm.
or I'm not. My friends are going to call me or they're going to not call me. People are going to be there for me or they're not. And I'm not going to worry about it. And I'm like, wow. And then as I'm talking to her about this, she goes, "Yeah, that changed my mindset to not be so focused on the odds of things
Hmm.
happening." And I just said it either is or it isn't. And she goes, "So yeah, every day I just kind of get up to see what's going to happen or what's not going to happen." And I'm like, now that's optimism. Like that is amazing. That all the stuff that she's been through, and she just has this kind of like, yeah, things are going to happen or they're not. I'm going to live or I'm not. I want to die or I'm not, right? I'm going to wake up tomorrow and be happy or
Hmm.
I'm not. And I love that. Just that beautiful, like kind of
Yeah.
optimistic. I'm going to give everything a 50-50 chance to happen. And when we finally had that discussion, I realized that her story was not pathetic. It was not going to bring people down. It's so unbelievably
Absolutely.
inspiring because despite everything that she went through, she still had such a wonderful outlook on life, and it just made me think, man, I want to adopt that. And when just one more thought before you go on is that when I want to think that something's pathetic or I want to think that something is so hard, maybe that's the wrong thing to do
Hmm.
because she certainly didn't think it was pathetic. She didn't find it hard. She was just like, hey, it's 50-50, piece of cake. Why didn't I allow her to be that way? And I could learn from that too. That you know what? When you know what's behind it, when you know behind the story of what people have gone through or what they're going through, then you can connect with them in an authentic
Hmm.
way. And why can't we lean in when her and I talk to how optimistic and beautiful her outlook on life is? Why do we have to focus on the top parts that are difficult? And she was just like, yeah, I don't care about the difficult stuff. It's 50-50. What are you going to do? I'm like, wow, that's a lot we can learn.
Strong, strong and inspiring, similar to Patricia, where she first kinda gave you kind of a trite anecdote about, every day I put my feet on the ground, and you kinda whisked it off, and then as you got to know her a little better and talked more over the months, she kinda rephrased it, really meant the same thing, and you took it to heart. That wow, it's really a positive outlook.
Yeah, don't you like sometimes like if somebody says to you, you know, hey man, you lost all this weight and became all healthy and whatever, and then you're like, yeah, you know, it's all right, but everybody's got their stories, no big deal.
Mhm.
And then they go, okay, well, whatever, fine, it's no big deal. Okay, fine, it's no big deal. Meanwhile, they have no idea what you went through year after year after year and what it took, and this reframing your mind, the rewiring, and the whole thing. And with Patricia, I first spoke to her, and I knew a little bit about her story, but I didn't know a lot about it. And I said, so what kind of thought process do you go through each day? And she goes, you know what? I just get up, put my feet on the ground, make my bed. She goes, if I have the opportunity to go forth, I will. If not, I just fall back in the bed. And she goes, but yeah, that's what I try to do every day. And I kind of rolled my eyes, going, oh my god, like, oh well, that doesn't help me. Like, wow, you put your feet on the ground and get moving every day. Big deal. Like, okay, buy me a
Hmm.
Hallmark card, right? So I kind of discounted it. And then when I started to talk to her more, and I realized that she had cared for her dad who was dying of prostate cancer when she was going through chemo. And that was the fourth cancer that she had as an adult. She
She
had
had
five
5,
different
yeah.
cancers as an adult. So many cancers. She was just like, hey doc, just cut it out. Like whatever. You know, like she was really amazing dealing with five different types of cancer in her life. But she not only did she do that, but she did it maintaining a love affair with her husband, who she met shortly before her first cancer, and how they could navigate that over a 35-year period, the health and the uncertainty and the, am I going to live, am I going to die, and all the side effects, and the and yet they were able to remain, you know, lovers and so close and so bonded throughout all of that. I thought, man, that's amazing. And then I found out that before she got her first cancer, before she met Dave, she had escaped a 4-year, intensely brutal physical, emotional relationship where she was sent to the hospital. She was just traumatized to the nth degree of what anybody should be traumatized to. And she escaped that and still was able to be optimistic enough to find love, and still was able to be optimistic enough to fight her way through five cancers. And at the end of it, and you know, we were kind of wrapping up our discussions, and she said, yeah, so you know, I know it sounds trite, but every day I just get up, put my feet on the ground, make my bed, and go about my day and see, you know, see what happens. I'm just like, whoa, that is
Mm,
amazing. What can I learn from that? I couldn't have learned it unless I knew her
right.
story. But once I knew her story, I'm like, oh my God, you have the courage, the optimism, the strength to put your feet on the ground every day and try to go about your day. What the hell? And it doesn't mean I don't have the right to complain, but what the hell am I complaining about? Why am I not just putting my feet on the ground and going about my day and having this mindset of, you know what? Hey, if I have to lay back in bed, I will. But if not, I'm going about my
Mm.
day. I love that attitude. And what I learned from each one of these stories is that depth of what people have gone through. So when you understand their mindset today, the depth of what they've gone through frames it with you so you can have an authentic, connecting discussion with them. And that's, I think, what the beauty of the book is. That's the beauty of what my experience has been, you know, with this project.
Yeah, and it's the beauty of reading it and participating it. You have Jen who went through her father's cancer, and he would call her nurse, and she would act like it, and and later she would go to UCLA and become a pediatric oncologist. You have Marlene,
Hmm.
who's an actual oncologist in New York City, and her anger is that patients don't take her advice. It's so many dimensions to this terrible, terrible cancer.
Hmm. Well, thank you for taking the time for the book, because it's really wonderful when people do that, because you know, a lot of people go, oh well, I don't want to read a book about cancer. It's not about
Mhm.
cancer. It's about people's
The human spirit.
experience, and who doesn't know somebody going through
Yeah.
trauma, and who wouldn't like to have a couple of more tools in the belt on how do we deal with them. And I love it. You brought up Marlene, and that was her deal. Her main. I caught her at the right time in life because she hadn't talked to anybody about any of this stuff. All of the people I interviewed had one thing in common. They all said, "Yeah." Well, they had two things in common. They all said, "Yeah, my life's not that interesting. Nobody wants to hear about me," because they're just living their
Mm.
lives, right? 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 You don't think your life's any extraordinary thing because you're looking at everybody else going, they're extraordinary. Meanwhile, when people know your story, they're like, "What the heck?" Right? So everybody thinks, my story's not that interesting. That was one. And two, they were all willing to talk about things they had never explored
Mm.
before. At least not in the outside voice. Maybe in their head they had explored it, but not outside. And Marlene's was that she was an oncologist for 40 years, and she was, now that she had lived this long life, fulfilling, beautiful relationship, daughter, and wonderful friends, and this great career, whatever. She was becoming more and more desperate for people to take her advice because she knew better. She could help them. She could enhance their lives, maybe even perhaps save their lives. And if people didn't take her advice, and they'd say, "No, you know what? I'm sure the cancer is just stress. I'll get rid of stress. No, if I eat better." And she was like, "No, let me take care of you." But she was becoming more
Hmm.
desperate because she knew that if they didn't take her advice, they possibly would not end up having this beautiful, passionate, long, life, and all the joys that could bring to them. They might miss out on. And she was just like, "Man, I have no part of it. I'm desperate for people to take my advice because I see the beauty of what life could give to someone." And so her story is really, really touching because I'll tell you, I have had many people tell me that Marlene's story inspired them to take a deep breath and to ask their doctor, "How are you doing today?"
Mm.
And the doctor walks in and says, "So what can we do? Why are you here? How you doing?" You go, "Wait a second, before we get going, how are you doing,
Hmm.
doc?" And I'm just like, wow, that is so cool because that's what we wanted. Who who's ever said to their doctor, "No, no, no, forget about me for
Hmm.
a second. How are you
Mm.
doing, doc?" But the doctors are just like, "What the heck?" Right? Because they're people
Yeah,
too.
they certainly are. And then you have the wonderful story of Bobby who loses, his love with cancer, but then finds another, and and this she would have been happy for me. I mean, it's another wonderfully inspiring story.
Oh, thanks. I led off the book with Bobby's
Mm.
story because I think what I wanted to do is, if you told me, and this did happen to me, "Hey, somebody lost the love of their life and they're as happy as they could be." I go, "What? No, it's not possible." Right? No, no, no. This was the love of their life. Changed who they are, like in every way you could ever
Mm.
imagine. That's the love of their life. That's the kind of person. And they lost that person very quickly to cancer after meeting and marrying them. And I go, but you said that they're the happiest they could ever be. "Oh, they are." I'd be like, "Come on, man. I mean, seriously." Because we come built with these assumptions because of what we went through, or because of what we think about things, or how we process emotion, that other people have to be dealing with things and processing emotions the way we would. Like, how in the world could we ever imagine that Bobby would be living his best life? And so he meets Brandy. As he likes to say, Brandy puts a new pair of glasses on him. All of a sudden, man, he sees life a totally different way. He's not angry. He wants to be his best self. He just becomes this wonderful human being, the best Bobby he could ever be, thanks to Brandy. And they have this beautiful love affair of being there for each other and being with each other and being their best people. And just they now are blissful. And she gets cancer very quickly and dies. And one of the things that they were able to do during this time that she was going through her treatments was to talk about
Mm.
everything, A to Z. And one of the things they talked about was Brandy saying to Bobby, "Listen, you're going to need therapy after I'm gone. And I need you to promise me that you go talk to a professional. But you also need to be loved, and you're your best self. I'm not going to be the person that gets to enjoy that, but somebody else needs to, and you need to be free to go do that. Just live a happy, fulfilled, the best life you could lead. So he goes to therapy after she passes, and he is open to the idea, and he reconnects with somebody from his past. They have a lot of things in common with regards to traumas and losing people and this kind of stuff, and they bond, they fall in love. They're married now about
Hmm.
15 years, as happy as could be. And I asked him one day, I go, Bobby, like, how in the world? And he goes, look, man, he goes, if Brandy and I were married, if she didn't die, there's no possible way I could see myself being any
Right.
happier. We'd have kids, we'd be married forever. I'm sure it'd be the greatest love affair ever. He goes, but that didn't happen. But you want to know something? Where I'm at today, I wouldn't trade it for a thing. I've got a wonderful wife. I'm the happiest I could ever be. Yeah, it didn't happen that way, but it happened this way. I wouldn't trade it for
Hmm.
anything. I wouldn't trade my wife for anything in the world. And I'm like, wow. So when you tell me, Joey, oh, I know this guy and it's really, it's kind of a, sad story, happy story, whatever. I'm not going to discount it anymore. If you tell me that somebody was grateful to hear a diagnosis of something difficult, if you're going to tell me somebody was relieved when somebody died, whatever you might tell me that I might not believe, I'm always going to believe, because we don't know what people have gone through or what they're going through. And when I really identified with one thing Bobby told me, as he said, he and Brandy had done so much processing of the fact that she was going to die, and so much talking through it all from every angle possible, that he, after she died, it wasn't a very long grieving
Hmm.
period. But what he needed to do was get away from people, because all the people that knew him just kept looking at him like puppy
Mm.
dog eyes. Like, oh, this got to be so hard for you. It's so the hard part started a long time ago. He had long started to heal, even
Right.
partially why Brandy was still alive. They were healing together. And so after she passed, he had already done a lot of the work. He had already done a lot of the grieving. He had done a lot of the processing, and he was uh, committed to, because he promised Brandy he was committed to moving
Mm.
forward. And so he had to get away from everybody, because everybody wanted him to be in a place where he felt
Hmm.
terrible. And he had long processed that stuff. He wanted to be in a place where he could feel good. He promised Brandy he would do that. And so all these people around him were saying, "Oh, this must be so hard," and looking at him, all sad like, and "Oh, must be so." And no, he had to get away from them. So it's like, man, just to know where he was at would have been a great way to be able to connect with him in an authentic way, because you could have helped him move forward rather than trying to keep him in the place that you thought he was supposed to be in. That's a great lesson to learn,
Oh my
right?
goodness, yes. And then David, you're riding your bike. You're on the George Washington Bridge. You are miles away from from Central Park closing up, and you talk to somebody for directions, and you learn about the ice cream cone jacket. I mean, you come into
Mm.
these stories. It's so wonderful.
Well, look, you talk to people all the time, right? And they tell you stuff, and you're just like, huh? Like you're blown away when people start to talk. You just go like, wow, people are quite
Yes,
amazing, right? I mean, they're just amazing.
remarkable.
And we don't always have the time to talk, and we don't always know how to talk to somebody to bring out those amazing things, or they're not in a place to talk to us or whatever. But man, I definitely have learned through this. Even though I was a good talker, a good communicator, very observant, I've learned how to kind of step back and be more present when you're interacting with someone, at least as often as I can be. And it leads to really profound experiences. And, you know, I mused in the book about how before I entered this project, if somebody had told me, hey, I lost my dad to cancer a few years ago, I would have been like, oh man, I'm sorry to hear that. And then tried to exit the conversation as much as possible, as quickly as possible. Cause what the heck do you say? But I learned through this project that, yeah, maybe that's the wrong thing
Mm.
to do. Maybe the right thing to do, as you asked me in the beginning, was to be there, to be present, right? To not abandon, to not isolate. And so I'm asking this girl for directions, and she sees this cancer logo on my jersey, and she said, "Oh, where are you biking from?" And I said,
Hmm.
"California." And she was like, "What the heck? Are you kidding me?" I go, "Yeah, I'm literally like a couple of miles from the end. Like this is it, 5,000 miles. I'm here." She goes, "Wow." She goes, "My dad died of cancer." And instead of going, "Oh, I'm sorry," and like going, "Do you know how I get to where I'm going to? I need directions." I said, "Whoa, really?" I go, "What was he like?" And she said, "Oh my God, he was like the greatest guy ever." And we're strangers. We didn't,
Right.
right? We're just passing strangers. He was the greatest guy ever. In fact, she goes, "I'm a cyclist now because of my dad." And I'm like, "Well, really?" She goes, "I've never done like 5,000 miles." She goes, "But I did get to go to all these great places in the world with my dad. Sometimes we couldn't because he was going through treatment. Other times we could." She goes, "But the memories we built are amazing." And I'm like, "Oh my God, that sounds great." And she goes, "Yeah, could you imagine? Like, like he turned me on to this, and we just would be on our bikes for hours at a time talking about everything. We just bonded in a way that you'd always want to bond with your dad. It was the greatest thing ever." And I went, "Oh my God, that's so touching." She goes, "Yeah, and he had this great sense of humor even throughout, the whole cancer experience. And he used to wear this jersey with ice cream cones on it." And I started smiling. She goes, "Yeah, I know, right? Like, oh, who's gonna like take anybody seriously that's got a jersey with ice cream cones all over it?" And she goes, "His friends used to make fun of him and laugh at him, and he asked to be buried in that so that when we did the wake, people would see him and they get a kick out of it." She said, "Oh my God, it was like so funny, and everybody was laughing and smiling, and it's just the kind of experience I'd want to have." She goes, "Every time I get on my bike, I think about my dad and all of our trips and all of that." And she goes, "It's just, you know what? I mean, like I just got the greatest memories of him." And I went, "Wow." I go, "I can't believe you shared all of that with me. Thank you." And she goes, "No, thank you for what you're doing. And go over the bridge here, turn left, turn right, go whatever." And I go on the bridge, we say our goodbyes, and I think to myself, I'm never ever gonna run into that woman
Mm.
ever again. No question. I will never run into her ever again. And she'll never run
Right.
into me, right? Our paths will never cross again. But I know without a doubt that the story about the bonding she was able to do with her dad and the ice cream cone jersey and the just the guts to be able to talk about something so intimate with a stranger because you know that at that moment I showed her that I cared. I wanted to hear, and she wanted to open up, and just that connection, that authentic connectivity that we can have as humans. um, that is a tool I carry
Hmm.
around now, right? Now I make it okay that somebody could laugh, make others laugh at their death. That they could just, all they want to do is put a smile on people's face because we, right, like, we don't think of it
Right.
that way. And now I'm able, because of her, to go, you know what, that's so cool.
Do you That's
So
wonderful.
I tried to bring these stories in a way, Joey, that would move people and get them to really have a very private, in-depth look at the play, at the experience of life, and then maybe they could have a more meaningful interactions with people as a result.
I know many epiphanies were arrived with myself while reading it, and it's wonderfully done. I highly recommend. Do you consider yourself a numerologist? Tell me about the number one.
Ah, oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Because can I tell you a story? Because very few people know this story. I'll try to not make it a super long story, but so my sister had was on the phone with my dad when my dad died, and it was really traumatic for her. They were very close, and she told me that she was seeing ones all the time. And I go, what are you talking about? This is during her cancer
Hmm.
treatments. She's like, "Yeah, I'd look at the clock and it'd be 11:11, or the kids would come home, and they got extra credit on an assignment, so they got a score of 111. Or I went to go pick look up on the map on how far it was from one place to another, and it was 11.1 miles. And I'm like, all right, whatever. And she goes, well, it's not just like every time, but every time I see these ones, I think maybe that's Dad looking
Hmm.
over us, and it's like my guardian angel. And I went, that's a really sweet thought, right? And so I'm talking to someone who's telling me a story that is very based in their faith and their religion and all this other stuff, and it happened to be at 11:11 that she told me this. And or when I remembered, the thing, I looked over the clock, and I had to send her a note saying, oh my god, it was 11:11 when you told me this, and the whole thing. So it was just a really nice thought that, isn't it wonderful, the kind of things that people could get some peace out of. My sister got some peace out of every time she saw the ones. She thought it was, her dad, our dad. So after she passed, um, man, me and my kids, like they would be in room 111. We would be at the lake and we'd drive home and it was 111 degrees when we left. We would pull into the driveway and it was 11:11 at night. And I just would chuckle like, oh my gosh, maybe that's June looking out for me. Isn't that cool? So here's the part of the story you don't know. Okay. So when you write a book, okay, it gets written and rewritten a million times. Okay. And then it gets moved around. This story goes here, that story goes there, and then the editor works on it, and then the copyright editor, and then the layout guy lays it out, and it's a big long process. It's not possible that you could make up, putting anything anywhere, whatever. So I get this text from one of my friends, and they said, nice move on the ones. And I go, excuse me? Oh, the one story with your sister. That was a real clever trick at the end. And I go, what are you talking about? And they said, the story. I go, yeah. She goes, pick up the book. I go, yeah. She goes, see where you finished the chapter on the ones? I go, well, and I start flipping. It ended up on page 111. I mean, what the
Yeah.
hell? I I, I was like, chills ran down my body. I'm completely speechless. There's no possible way I could have made it be on
Mm.
page 111. No possible way. Because with all the rewrites, with all the editing, with all the moving stuff around, with the layout, with the copyright, with blah, 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 there's no possible way I could have said, make this end on page
Right.
111. It's just dead. And I didn't, it was so random. Not only I didn't even know about it until my friend texted me this thing. And every once in a while, somebody else send me a note going, oh, you finished June's story on page 111. I'm like, no, I didn't. I didn't know that, but thank you for pointing it out because it's freaking cool, man. So I don't know about how deep I could go into all of that, but it is a nice thought to know that, yeah, coincidences sometimes they could maybe sometimes be a little bit more,
Mm.
right?
One of the quotes you had, and I wonder if you still hold to it. You say you gained observation, but no conclusions.
Yes, and it is true. I mean, you learn stuff along the way, right? You learn stuff along the way, but the reason I wrote the stories is because I just wanted to. The way I think about it is that people have all these hallways in their brain, and they lead to good places, sometimes very bright places, and we can be illuminated by that. If we go on a talk with them about these things. They also have hallways that lead to very dark places or very scary places or lonely places because of traumas that they've been through, been subjected to, or that they created for themselves. And sometimes we get to go with them on a journey and really, like sometimes when a friend leans in and goes, man, I got to tell you something I never really told anybody about. And you go, oh, right, okay, we're going to go down a little hallway. So I don't think that I made a conclusion about judging what people have gone through or measuring it. Was it bad or not bad? Did somebody have the right to feel more trauma because they're Patricia and they went through 5 different cancers? Or do they have the right to feel less trauma because they're Dieppe and they only have a fear of cancer? No, everybody's trauma is the same. And so the conclusion that I made is There aren't any
Hmm.
conclusions. There just aren't. I mean, yeah, we learn stuff along the way, and we can say, okay, I know I can come to a conclusion. I probably shouldn't run red lights because eventually I'm going to get hit. Okay, I'm not saying that. When it comes to the human experience, when it comes to emotional responses to things, when it comes to the idea of what we think people have already gone through or what they've been through, we just don't know. And I'm making no conclusions. I'm making no assumptions about how somebody should be dealing with something, how they might deal with it, what could help them, what could not help them. I don't have any answers. No prescriptions, no preaching. I just don't have those conclusions. What I do have is a keen sense of the fact that if we are present with someone and they give us a right to go down those hallways with them, even if for just a moment, like the girl with the ice cream cone jersey, if we go down a hallway just for a moment with them and we get an observation into the human experience that we didn't have before, then we walk away with more. And so I've been fortunate enough to have thousands of these types of observations. And my conclusion is just that I don't know
Hmm.
anything. Like I can't assume anything about the human experience, but I love it when somebody gives me an opportunity to go down a hallway with them because we can learn together. We can connect in a new way. We can just be given more light into that room that shows us the human experience. And I mean, honestly, isn't that all we want in life? I mean, that's what you do. That's what you do with these podcasts. Is you just shine light on people's experience so it'll move others. And I'm sure you get moved along the way. And you probably don't have any answers as to what makes people's stories interesting, spectacular, whatever. You just like watching and being a part of it. And I've heard you say this before that you appreciate the opportunity that people, share these experiences with you because you learn. Doesn't give you any conclusions, but you just get to observe and learn, and I love that about it.
Yeah, I've got more questions than answers. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about discipline. I lost a lot of weight. People always ask me how I did it, like there's some quick answer. And I always say it's just discipline. So similar, where, it kind of had to come to Jesus moment, where I was gaining all this weight. I started my business, and the doctor said to me, if you don't lose the weight, you're not going to see your daughter graduate. So, I slowly made changes, and but people kind of want a quick answer, and so my answer is discipline and focus. And I wonder, David, how does discipline play a role in your life? Have you considered yourself disciplined when you made that switch, when your athletics became a larger part of your life? Did discipline take more of a role or less, or was it always there?
Yeah. Discipline's a tough word because uh, yes, everything in life takes discipline, but right, but um, I look at I look at the change in behavior is it becomes more of a
Hmm.
habit than being disciplined. Do you know, like 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 when it comes to eating, right? I don't really say, okay, I can do this and I can't do that. Okay. I'm not disciplined about what I eat or I'm not disciplined about what I stay away from. I kind of have a habit that says I should do more good things that lead me this way. I should do less bad things that lead me
Mm.
that way. But it took forever for me to learn that stuff and figure it out and apply it to myself and make it become a habit. So my discipline is in learning. That's where my discipline is. It's in learning and saying, okay, if I make a mistake, it's
Right.
cool. What can I learn from it? If I waste time, fine. What can you learn from it? So I really, really am disciplined about what can I learn. So that leads
Hmm.
to an adoption or a change in habits, right? It changes your behavior, or you lean into good behavior. So I think the discipline for me is learning and and I've learned how to forgive myself for making mistakes. I've learned how to let it go and not carry things around as a burden because if I can just learn I mean, that's good. So I'm really disciplined about that part of it.
Interesting.
Do you know, like, does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it's a really, really cool angle. You equate discipline to habits and learning. I get a lot of pushback from people, of it being too militant and you need more compassion and you need more. And I don't mean to be the end all of discipline. Look, I use it better in places than other places. It's not mandatory.
Hmm.
I like self discipline's a little bit different. I wonder if giving your conversations and your discussions with Terry and Marlene and Bobby and these great stories. I wonder how their perception of discipline would be.
Yeah. So I admire people that are, you know, super
Mm,
disciplined with themselves, with the way they handle emotions, with the way they go about their work, their relationships. I admire that. And some people are really, really good about it. Some people are very, they walk very narrow paths in certain parts of their life, and they do that because they're disciplined to know if I get off that path, it's not going to be a good thing, or whatever. It's not going to be the best thing, right? So I really admire that, and I think each one of the stories is contains some amount of
hmm,
discipline, and where I failed in life, or where it was it where others failed me in life, was not uh, teaching me from an early age uh, to have a self awareness, to be able to. We talked about in the beginning. I just have my head down. I think discipline takes
hmm,
awareness, and without awareness, you couldn't have it. I feel like um, most of the people I've ever run into in my life, they have more discipline, as it were, because they had more self awareness.
hmm.
And some people never gain self awareness. Some have it from the beginning. Some, like me, develop it along the way. And I think that's where discipline can start. Because what is discipline, right? I'm going to do this. I'm not going to do this. This is cause and effect. This is the side. This is what's going to happen if I don't do this. This is what's going to happen if I do this. And you're disciplined because you're like, you get it. I didn't get it all until I became self
Mm.
aware. So that's why I kind of say, like, I lean into learning. And I think many of the people in my book, I could go back, I mean, shoot, we could talk for hours about this, how each one had a different sense of discipline in their life. But I think it really is parallel with a sense of awareness, self awareness.
Another great link. Dave Richman, what motivates you?
uh, a lot, a lot motivates me. The thing that motivates me the most, though, is that learning.
Mm.
So I'll tell you a quick story. When I was starting to do endurance athletics, one of the first things I did was this ridiculous 87-mile rollerblade race in Georgia. Okay,
87 mile.
on rollerblades. Completely stupid. I mean, it was, for a guy that's not coordinated, it was a stupid idea. But um, I was like on this quest of, oh, I'd like to learn who I am and what this whole thing about being athletic means and all of that. And I thought, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. Why not go try this? So about 3 hours in, about 30 miles into it, I hit the wall. I was done. Physically, emotionally, psychologically, I had no idea what the hell I was in. I was so over my head. It wasn't even funny. I had no self awareness. I had
Hmm.
no awareness of what I had got myself into. And so I hit this wall. It's like, 90 degrees and
Yeah.
80% humidity. And I got mountains I got to get over. I don't even know how to rollerblade. I mean, it's a
Wow.
mess. And I'm leaning over. I'm leaning on my knees sideways to the hill so I don't drift down. And I'm just like, man, that's it. You've reached your limit. And it's it. And then I said, okay, you can go home now, because I felt so wonderful that I had learned everything about myself that I
Hmm.
could learn. I reached my absolute limit, and I said, okay, you can go home. And then I thought, that line of sweat there, if you just take one step past it, You're going to learn something. I said, okay, all right, let's take a step. And then I said, take another step, you're going to learn. And another step, you're going to learn. And if you can just somehow get to the top of the mountain, you're going to learn. And then boom, boom, boom. And for the next almost 6 hours, I just kept learning every movement of my legs, everything that was going on. I was learning. I finally made it to the finish line. It took me 9.5 hours to go 87 miles on rollerblades. I had no business doing it, but it was 6 hours. It was 3 hours of everything I knew about myself and 6 hours of learning. And I think about
Wow.
that every almost every day, and certainly in every tough situation. I think about like, you know what? I've reached my limit, or I know everything, or I've got a conclusion, or whatever. And then I go, oh, yeah, gosh, if you could take one more step, could you learn something? And so that's the thing that drives
Wow.
me is that's what motivates me is to say, what can I learn? Because I don't know about you, Jerry, but I don't have much in common with people that know the answers.
I definitely don't.
If they know everything, I don't have anything
Yeah.
in common with you because I don't know anything. I'm just learning. And that learning is, especially if it's in a purposeful way with your head up and, really like deep, authentic learning about who you are and how you interact and how people affect you and how you affect them and what you can get out of life and what you can help with and all. Like, wow, isn't that a great thing? So, long answer again. I'm good at long answers, but
Love it.
what motivates me is learning.
And then how do you measure success?
Oh, a lot of ways, right? Success sometimes is knowing when to quit. You failed at whatever you were doing, but you successfully quit. Right? That's
Mm,
good, right? So if you have a horrible relationship and you finally learn how to quit it, isn't that success? Okay, the relationship failed, but isn't that success? If you set a goal for yourself and you hit it, but you really didn't have to try, is that
mm,
success? I don't know if it is because you didn't really push yourself the right way. So I don't know if it's call it a success. So I'm not sure. If you set a high enough goal and you achieve that goal, then that's success for a moment. But then you got to go on to the next higher goal. So I think success is being at one with what you're trying to do and knowing, when to keep moving and when to fold. you know when to hold them and know when to
absolutely.
fold. Right. So
Wow.
I think for me, success is, I've done countless races and time goals and whatever. I've raised kids. I have a wonderful, healthy marriage now. I would say that there's a lot of things that I would look at as successful, but I couldn't tell you what it is because again, I want to keep doing things. So I don't know. I guess success, if I could, is yeah. When I go to bed, did I go? I made more good choices than bad choices. I guess that's success.
It's a wonderful answer, and there's no right answer, and it's subject to change, just like anything else.
Mhm.
Dave Richman, absolute pleasure. When I learned that we were going to talk, I was excited, and learning about you and learning about what you've learned and the opportunity to get what you learn and to share it with all of us is a wonderful, wonderful gift. How can we get in touch with you?
Well, thank you. If it wasn't for a platform like yours, we wouldn't have the chance to have talked. So I'm very appreciative as well. So thank you. Um, cycleoflives.org is the website. 100% of the proceeds from the book go to support the organizations that were chosen by the book participants. Um, we talked about Dr. Myers, so NYU Perlmutter, um, the Moffitt Cancer Center, Children's Hospital LA, you name it. There's a bunch of charities that book proceeds go to support. So they can find out about me at cycleoflives.org. I have other books. I do expressive writing seminars. I do some talking, public speaking to help people. And yeah, it's just if they want to be moved by a good book, hopefully this is one that can do that. They can find out more about it. Just look me up or go to Amazon, buy the books.
Absolutely. And David Richman, RICHMAN.com, Cycle of Lives on Facebook and on Twitter and on
Mhm.
Instagram. Actually, it's David Richman _ Cycle of Lives. But David, thank you so much for your time. You're not going to believe this, but this interview was exactly an hour and 11 minutes.
How
One
many
hour
minutes?
11.
Get
I'm
out of
looking at
here.
the timer right now. Thank you so much for your time.
Holy cow.
And
That's
yes, it
ridiculous. It
is.
is. It was an
Exactly.
hour and
Yeah.
11.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your
That's
time. I
stupid.
hope one day to have a cup of coffee with you, and keep up the great work, my friend.
Oh my God. You're never going to leave my thoughts now. That's amazing.
Thank you
Thank you,
so
Joey.
much. Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.